Welcome to Roots of Faith Ancestry. I'm Renee Richard, and I'm here with Judy Riffle and Leonard Smith III, and they're somewhere in this courthouse, and we'll be with you today. We're in Plaquemine, Louisiana, where Iberville Parish, county seat or parish seat in this state is located. And this parish is one of the original ones that was founded when we became a state. The records here date back to about 1770. I hate giving exact dates, but when I was in here looking, that's about the earliest date that I found here. And so just a few things to point out. When you come here to do research, come to any courthouse to do research, wherever it is, please be prepared. And that's part of what we're going to show you today is what these look like. Every time you visit one, it's going to be different, but you want to come comfortable. You want to wear comfortable shoes and have a plan in mind for what you want to cover while you're there. The most important thing I can tell you is please ask for help. The records here plenty of times are indexed, other times they're not. And so you want to be able to maximize the time that you're here. A lot of these books are going to be very heavy, as you will see as we work through them, and oftentimes they're high on shelves, and you're going to be reaching up to get them. So that's why I just want to prepare you to be prepared when you come here. This morning we're going to be looking at a variety of records. We've talked about them on other shows. For instance, I'm going to start out with marriages. And we talked about that on the Vital Record show, and mainly when we did the Courthouse show, we elaborated on it. Now you get to see how to pull a marriage here and some of the nuances that you might see. So I'm going to start off with a marriage as an index. In this particular courthouse, as in many courthouses, you have them arranged male and female. Sometimes you know who the groom is, sometimes you only know who the bride is, sometimes you actually know who both parties are. In this case, I want to pick a name here, like that's common in this area. Mariano is one of those. So I'm going to look for a groom with the name of Mariano, and I'm going to come to this index book. And they have different tabs. I'm looking under M. And what's interesting about these indexes that I want to really help you to understand is how they work. Each section is labeled, say, such as MA, MB, MC, MD. If it's a common name in a community, they might have an entire page dedicated just for them. If it's a name that's not common, then they may not even be listed on the front of the index. They'll be listed elsewhere, and you have to locate that. For instance, a name such as Meyer, M-E, there is no Meyer page for them. So you would just go to page 5 and see if that Meyer is in this particular courthouse. And we're not going to waste time doing that. I just want to show you how that index works. So we are looking up Mariano, and under the MAs, Mariano has an entire page dedicated to themselves. Depending on the courthouse that you go in, you might have 5 pages of 41. The Mariano we're looking for, it says Mariano is on 41. So I've already located this. We're looking up Joseph. So I'm coming down here and I see Joseph B. His wife is Alice Billings. They give the date of marriage in this particular index as September 25th, 1895, and they give me a book number. It's at the top. It's recorded in volume 6, and it says 538. Again, every courthouse is different. In this case, 538 is the entry number. So now I know where to go. So I've already pulled it, but we go to the shelf, and we're going to get the books that we need. When I get there, I find out that there are 2 volume 6s. So I see on the side it says Record of Marriage. So I pull the first book for the Record of Marriage. And again, it's book 6. And I'm going to entry number 538. Now to save time, I went to look for 538, and it wasn't there. So then my second choice would be that it's entry 538. It's got to be creative in a courthouse. It could go either way. So I find it here. And this record actually gives me who the bride and the groom are, who their parents are, which you don't always get. But as I look down this marriage record, I notice that it says who the witnesses are, and it says original is signed. Well, that tells me this is not the original because he's not signing it. It's all done in the same handwriting. So that's a clue that somewhere in this courthouse there's another book, and we know that there were 2 book 6s. So now I want to look at the second book. And this is just something, I mean, this is beginner, but you always want to look for the signatures. It tells you a lot about your ancestor. On a marriage record, it tells you if you can read or write. Because even in 1895, they may make a mark, and it will tell you information about your ancestor. So this says marriage book 6 on the front, but on the sign, it says original marriage licenses. so I'm not sure what I'm going to find. Well, when I got there to this entry 538 in Book 6, here I have a license to marry, which is good. And I also have a bond, which is good. We talked about this in the show as well. And I have the record of marriage, complete with witnesses signing it and the bride and the groom signing it. So this is actually the record that you would want to document for your ancestor because it is the original, even though on our record of marriages book, it wasn't. So in this case, it gives you the information of who the bride and the groom's parents are. So now you have that information, but not all of them give you that. So again, this was just a real good example in this particular book where we're seeing the bond, the license, and the marriage. But you're going to have various ones in here, and you just have to be creative in what you're looking for when you look for your ancestors. So we're going to jump over. We're going to go in here and find Judy and Leonard and look at a different record group because there's so many in here today for beginning purposes. We're going to be looking at just some of the ones we talked about, such as conveyances, a probate, so that you can see that. We might get into actually something like a naturalization record or a civil suit because all of these things give information about our ancestors. So we're going to go find Judy and Leonard.
Okay, we're here again in the courthouse, and we want to actually go through the conveyance books. We actually have vendee and vendor, and the difference is that the vendee books are actually people who are purchasing. Vendors are the person who's selling. In some courthouses, it's grantor and grantee, so you know. And of course, the grantor is the seller, and the grantee is actually the person purchasing. So what I came, as I mentioned before, is that I actually carry a travel folder with me. And in this folder, it actually has my great-grandmother information. I have the census records. I also have a lot of the information I've actually done in this courthouse before, research I've done. But what I'm looking for now, I know that she actually owned some property here. And so what I want to do is actually go back and find that land record. And the way I did that is that in 1930, she actually is owning property, but in 1920, she's not owning property. So I know when I go to the conveyance book, I have to look in between those 2 years, those 10 years, I should say. So I'm actually going to open up the book.
That's the vendee book.
This is the vendee book, correct. And her last name was Jones. And also, I noticed that the spelling was wrong as well. So I'm actually going to the reference I'm looking for, and of course, it's a common name, as Renee mentioned, so there's a page in itself. So I'm going to page 113. And there's a list of Jones, because it's a very common name, but I'm going down the list and I'm looking for her first name, which is Lavinia, which is not a common name. And then I actually find her purchasing property not on the first page, not on the second page, but actually in 1920, April 26, 1920. So I'm actually going to pull that book. Now, I also noticed that her last name is spelled wrong. As far as I know it, let me say that because it's Jones, J-O-H-N-S, as in John, and then I've always known them as being Jones, J-O-N-E-S. So I'm actually have pulled the record.
The book number 45 in the index.
Okay. So
Entry number.
it's entry number 608. Conveyance book 45, mortgage book 41, and entry is 747. And here we go. It's actually a transaction. Lavinia L. Jones, widow of Forrest Jones, who is hereby appearing through her undersigned agent, which is her son, Forrest K. Jones, Jr. And there's a description of the property, which is in Dorseyville. Now, Dorseyville is nearby. It's actually a little small town that has, what, 2 or 3 streets long. It's not wide at all. And actually, there's a church there, St. John Baptist. And so, Bazley, it was actually Bazley Dorsey who actually, Bazil Dorsey is the person who actually purchased that land and subdivided it into subdivisions. but I actually can see that I actually have a signature of my grandmother as well as Paul Batts, who actually was a constable that I know of because he ended up marrying in the family. So this is one of the great records that I would definitely make copies of and actually add to the folder and also digitize it to put it on my system. But I know that this is just one of few records that you can find in the conveyance. And Judy, I know you found other type
yes,
records.
There's all kinds of records you'll find in the conveyance records. But one in particular I wanted to talk about is a marriage contract. And I have an example here that I've already looked up to show you. We've talked about marriage bonds and marriage licenses and marriage certificates, but this is one we haven't talked about. This is a marriage contract. And this is usually done prior to the couple getting married, and they would declare what property that they owned. In this case, of course, this one is in English. It's from 1825, and it's George Anselm, and he's marrying Fanny Laverne. And in this one, it gives the parents of both the bride and the groom.
That's right.
And it spells out what their property was. In today's terms, this might be considered a prenup agreement. So this is one more marriage record that you would find in the courthouse, and usually they're filed in the conveyance records.
Hello everyone, I'm Shannon Acord and this is Colette Keith, and we're talking about Veritas Vitae, a brand new show that's going to talk about the sacredness of God's gift of life from conception to natural death and every stage in between.
We'll be discussing human trafficking to abortion to hunger. So tune in every week to see these episodes and learn how we're all connected by these issues and learn about the power of God's truth.
Your contributions to the Bishop's Annual Appeal help support our own award-winning diocesan TV station, Catholic Life Television, that enables us to use this effective visual medium to proclaim the good news of God's love through the local community.
The fact that St. Vincent de Paul has a Beacons of Light television show, I'm a witness to tell you, before we were on Catholic Life TV, we were a much smaller organization. We weren't able to do what we can do today, and because of Catholic Life Television, we're doing so much more. And that's because people within the diocesan community invested. I thank all those who have either given or who are thinking about giving to the Bishop's Annual Appeal that supports this fine, outstanding diocesan ministry.
For more information, please call 225-336-8790 or visit baabr.org.
Do you need a little light in your life? Tune in to the next episode of Beacons of Light, where we'll share the story of the Society of St. Vincent de Paul in action, serving God's poor and homeless. We'll share stories of our volunteers and our supporters, making the gospel come to life for those in need.
God's way is my way, God's shield is around.
Okay, we're going to take a look at probate or succession records. Probate records document the disposition of a person's property when they die. Of course, every courthouse is different. In some courthouses, you will pull the files yourself. In some, you will look it up in the index and ask someone to pull it for you. And today, I thought we'd take a look at the probate record for Dr. J.B. Hacker. And he was the great-great-great-grandfather of Jim Parsons. Dr. Hacker was killed when the steamboat Gypsy exploded in 1854. So we're going to look up his probate, and we pulled the index for the probate records or the succession records, and we look under H, and we find HA. He doesn't have a page for himself, so we go to page 1 and look under all the names that start with HA. And here we find, here he is, the 6th District Court, succession number 285, John B. Hacker, 1854. And we've pulled this one already to show you what kinds of records you can find in a probate record. And in this particular one, he's got a petition someone is filing to open his probate, and it gives information on when he died, and it also has information, an inventory of all of his property. When someone died, they went to take an inventory of his property, and it goes into a whole lot of detail about the kinds of property that he owned, his land, his slaves, which he didn't have very many. He only had 4 slaves, all sorts of household items, beds. Looks like he has a very long list of things. Looks like he had a store. I think he owned a store with his stepson. So you'll see it goes on and on with all the property that he owned. And then there's a lot of other types of records, administrative types of records, and then a final accounting of what happened and how the property was distributed. And I think these probate records are very good also if you're researching African American ancestry too.
Yes,
those
it is.
inventories that I mentioned will list slaves, and Dr. Hacker didn't own a lot of slaves, but I think you have one here that this person did own a lot of slaves.
That's right. When you actually do an African American research, a probate record is a very good record for reference. This one actually has something unique because it actually gives the father's name, the mother's name, as well as the children, and it actually gives the value of the whole family unit. And it's Joseph, a Negro man, about age 42 years of age, his wife Charlotte, Negro woman, age about 28 years, and they had 2 children. The next one is also the same, Bill, a Negro man. So this is actually kind of rare. I haven't seen many documents like this in the courthouse.
Right. Most of the inventories will list the mother and her children,
That's
but
right.
Rarely do they have the father or the husband listed
The whole family unit.
as a whole family unit. So that is very unusual in this particular case.
But definitely a good resource for African American research.
Attention Roku users, you can now subscribe to Catholic Life Television's channel on your Roku device. Watch our live 24-hour broadcast as well as on-demand viewing of locally produced programming from the Diocese of Baton Rouge. So sit back, relax, and enjoy Catholic Life Television, available on Roku.
I wish I had known. Nobody told me that 35 years of research and dozens of medical studies have shown significant complications for women who've had an abortion. I didn't know abortion could lead to physical and emotional issues resulting from my choice. Now, I've got complications and learned the abortion I had when I was younger is the reason I'm now suffering. I want to let other women know because I would give anything to have known. Whether you're pregnant or had an abortion, learn the facts today.
Watch our programming on demand anytime at CatholicLifeTV.org.
I'm Jessica Cuba from St. George Parish, and you're watching Catholic Life Television.
We're back here in the courthouse, and we're going to talk about a group of records we haven't talked about yet, and those are civil suits. These are probably one of the least used records by genealogists, but they have some of the most interesting information. Haven't you found that in the
Yes.
civil suits? Besides people suing each other for money and property, you'll find divorce records. These are very important in our genealogy. I have an example here of a divorce from 1848. It's very uncommon back in those days, so it had to be for pretty good reasons for someone to file for a divorce. In this case, this poor lady filed 3 times for divorce from this guy, and finally it went through. This is Adele Morton and Richard Morton, suit number 158. And she goes on and on about what all he did to her, and it was a miserable life she had, but these can be very interesting and give you a lot of information in your family history. Also, besides divorce records, you'll find naturalization records. Sometimes they're filed in the civil suits. This particular one is from Ambrosius Bumstark, who filed for naturalization in 1856. The naturalization process was actually rather lengthy. First they would file a declaration of intention, then a few years later they would file a petition for naturalization, and then a few years after that, then they would get their certificate of naturalization. So in this particular case, this file we've pulled, he has both his declaration of intention, which says that he comes from Germany, and it gives the information about when he came.
Beautiful handwriting.
Yes, isn't that beautiful?
Wow. Mm-hmm.
And his intention to become a citizen of the United States of America. It says he landed in New Orleans on the 24th day of January in 1850, and has resided ever since that time in the United States. And then it comes to the next document, which is his petition of naturalization, which also gives some more information. And sometimes you'll find in a courthouse separate books for naturalization, and I pulled a couple here. This is a book a little bit later time period of naturalization records. These are from the 1880 time period, 1890 time period. These are declaration of intentions. It's a nice little form that they pre-printed, and they filled in the information there. And then there's this little book here I found of certificate of naturalization. And these are little certificates that when they finally became naturalized, they were issued a certificate. And here's a certificate book of naturalizations. So there's just a variety of records you can find in the courthouse. Leonard, you have some closing remarks to make about doing research in courthouses. You've done a lot, haven't you?
Oh, yes, I have. And as I say, this is where all the gold is kept. So once you get to the courthouse and you find all these records, you want to spend all day here. And remember, we talked about before that you want to make sure you dress comfortable, and you want to wear tennis shoes because you're going to be staying for a long time. As you can see, we've been staying a while. But also what's great about Iberville Courthouse is that they have a great staff here. You do your own copies here. It's a very large courthouse, as we've seen others that are very small. So this one is spread out pretty good. And so this is a good place. If you have any ancestors in this community, you definitely want to come to Iberville Courthouse.
We've had a fun day researching here at the Iberville Courthouse in Plaquemine. I do not want you to be intimidated, and that's one of the reasons we do this show, is to show you really what's available here. These are public records. They're for you to come and use, ask those questions. I especially want to thank Bubby DuPont. He's the clerk of court here, and he was nice enough to let us come in and do some filming. So I hope you've learned something, and we'll see you next time on Roots of Faith Ancestry.